50 Cent shared a screenshot of his private DMs with Will Smith after the rapper shared his 2 cents, no pun intended, on Will's.
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
Hollywood has never seen a moment like this, because this time, it wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was a public collapse of control. And now one name is echoing louder than the rest: 50 Cent. They say he didn't just comment on the situation, he flipped the entire narrative upside down. What started as the infamous Oscars slap has now turned into something far bigger. A hidden war of image, ego, and Hollywood power structures that were never meant to be questioned. Will Smith, the once untouchable golden boy, is now at the center of a storm he can no longer control. Jada Pinkett Smith, the woman who spent years reshaping the public story of their marriage, is now being re-examined under a completely different light. And 50 Cent? He's not whispering. He's allegedly speaking in a way that Hollywood hates the most. Direct, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. Because when he enters a story, it stops being gossip and starts feeling like exposure. Now the question the entire world is asking is simple. Was the Oscars slap just a moment of emotion? Or the moment the real Hollywood story finally cracked open?
Will Smith is a
I liked him.
Will Smith has been hiding the fact of who he really is, and it was exposed that night. He's really an
Like Will Smith is in a lot of hot water regarding this new sexual harassment lawsuit. Now, in a world where sexual harassment lawsuits are frequently filed against celebrities, unfortunately, you may be sitting at home thinking that you know exactly what kind of allegations these are. Well, let me tell you, you don't, and we're going to get into them in just a second. Now, what I also want to get into is that these are just allegations. We are not going to know exactly what happened in this case.
The moment it happened, nobody in the room fully understood what they had just witnessed. A live broadcast, the biggest night in Hollywood, and suddenly an unscripted moment that didn't fit into any category of entertainment. Will Smith walking onto that stage, Chris Rock mid-presentation, and a single action that instantly shifted the energy of the entire Dolby Theater. At first, confusion ruled everything. Some people laughed nervously, unsure if it was part of a bit. Others froze, trying to process whether what they saw was real. But within seconds, reality settled in and the atmosphere changed completely. The silence that followed was louder than any applause Hollywood had ever produced. Behind the scenes, the industry reacted even faster than the audience. Public relations teams were activated instantly. Crisis meetings began while the show was still airing. Statements were being drafted in real time, even before the event had ended. And that is where the story...
Did you ever speak to Chris Rock after the slap? Because he's your mate.
Yeah.
I would have been straight on the phone if it was my mate getting slapped.
No, but
going,
I was in a sticky situation because I was actually, an elected official of the union at the time.
Oh.
Will Smith is a
I liked him.
Will Smith has been hiding the fact of who he really is, and it was exposed that night. He's really an
But
he's a deep, dark thing. To do that in front of all those people, and to a really
story stopped being about a single moment. It became about control. Because in Hollywood, perception is everything. And once perception breaks, the damage spreads faster than truth can catch up. As clips of the incident went viral across the world, analysts, fans, and insiders all started pulling the moment apart frame by frame. Every expression, every movement, every reaction became evidence for different theories. Was it emotion? Was it pressure? Or was it something that had been building for years? And then something unexpected happened. Outside voices began to enter the conversation, including 50 Cent, whose commentary added a raw edge that Hollywood usually tries to avoid. Because once someone outside the system starts shaping the narrative, the system loses control of its own story.
What's happening with Will Smith and his family is why it's very hard to be rich, famous, and powerful. Because in order for you to scale, you have to let people come in and help. Those people will code switch and tell you they're one thing, whole time they're another thing, gathering
until it reaches court. One other thing I want to add is that we reached out to Will Smith's lawyer, who had a lot to say regarding this sexual harassment lawsuit, and I don't think you guys are prepared for what he said to us, so stick around until the end to find out what he said. So if you remember, back in March of 2025, Will Smith launched his very first tour in over 20 years called Based on a True Story Tour. So lawsuit aside,
long before the Oscars moment, Will Smith represented something rare in Hollywood: stability. He was the rare figure who managed to stay relevant across decades, adapting from television fame to blockbuster dominance without losing public trust. But that trust wasn't built on films alone. It was built on image. Carefully managed interviews, controlled public appearances, and a consistent narrative of success, family, and emotional intelligence. Jada Pinkett Smith, however, brought a different energy into that image. She was outspoken, independent, and often willing to challenge the traditional expectations placed on Hollywood relationships. Together, they became one of the most discussed couples in the industry. Not because they were perfect, but because they were unpredictable. And unpredictability in Hollywood always creates speculation. Over the years, interviews and public statements about their marriage only added more layers to the mystery. Words like non-traditional, freedom, and redefinition became part of their public identity. So when the Oscars incident happened, it didn't land in isolation. It landed on top of years of unresolved public curiosity. Suddenly, people weren't just reacting to a slap. They were re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about Will and Jada. And that is when external commentary started gaining attention, especially voices like 50 Cent, whose blunt, no-filter approach to celebrity culture contrasts sharply with Hollywood's controlled messaging. Whether people agreed with him or not didn't matter. What mattered was that he was speaking in a space where Hollywood usually expects silence. And that alone shifted the tone of the entire conversation. Because once silence breaks, truth, rumors, and speculation all enter the same room.
2016, she revealed that Chris Rock asked her out on a date because he thought that her and Will had divorced. She thought that Will slapping Chris was a skit. She said that Tupac proposed to her. She said that Tupac has alopecia, which is ridiculous because he had
Great, legendary comedian who's literally the best comedian of our generation.
Sure.
You wouldn't have like this whole wave of comedy that came after if it wasn't for Chris Rock. He's kicked open the doors. So for him to do that, but I wasn't allowed to say anything at that time because we were part of the committee that was supposed to punish him.
And how do you punish him?
Wow, wait. Just back up a second. Hang on.
I want to know
Will
what the punishment
Smith.
is.
As the aftermath continued, Hollywood didn't just react, it recalibrated. Every studio, every publicist, every media outlet began adjusting how they framed the incident. Some called it emotional. Others called it unacceptable. But behind every headline, there was a shared understanding that this moment was bigger than it looked. Because it wasn't just about Will Smith anymore. It was about what his image represented. For decades, he had been the face of controlled success, a celebrity who rarely stumbled publicly. That made the Oscars incident even more shocking. It didn't fit the narrative the world had been sold for years. And when a narrative breaks, everything connected to it becomes questionable. That included his marriage, his personal history, and the carefully curated public conversations around his family life. Old interviews resurfaced almost instantly. Conversations that once seemed harmless now carried new weight. Statements about relationships were replayed with completely different interpretations. And as the internet dissected every detail, commentary from outside Hollywood intensified. Figures like 50 Cent were mentioned more frequently in discussions, not because they were central to the event, but because they represented a different kind of truth-telling, raw, unfiltered, and unconcerned with industry approval. It was reinterpretation. A collective attempt to understand whether what happened on stage was an isolated moment, or the visible crack of something much deeper already breaking behind the scenes.
This tour actually took the public by surprise, considering that Will Smith was coming off the back end of the major controversy that most have coined the slappening. Obviously, Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars. What shocked me in particular was that I didn't know Will Smith had fans. I mean, I knew he had fans, but not enough fans to fill multiple stadiums across the tour. No hate to Will Smith. Growing up, I loved Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but my God, that did take me by surprise. Okay, I'm getting...
In the days following the Oscars, global conversation about celebrity behavior, emotional control, and the hidden pressures of fame. But underneath those surface-level discussions, something more complex was happening. The public wasn't just judging the moment, they were analyzing the entire ecosystem around it. Every past award show appearance, every red carpet interaction, every interview between Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith became part of a larger puzzle. And in that puzzle, nothing was viewed the same way again. The idea of the perfect Hollywood couple started to dissolve under the weight of reinterpretation. People began questioning whether what they had seen over the years was authenticity or performance. And that question didn't stay confined to fans. It reached industry insiders as well. Within entertainment circles, discussions became more cautious, more analytical. Because once a public narrative collapses, everyone connected to it becomes vulnerable to scrutiny. At the same time, commentary from external figures like 50 Cent continued to circulate online, adding another layer of intensity. His reputation for blunt honesty made his perspective stand out in a conversation otherwise filled with carefully worded statements. Whether people agreed with him or not, his presence in the discourse represented something important: the breakdown of Hollywood's usual information control. And once that control weakens, stories no longer belong to studios or celebrities. They belong to the public. And the public never looks at them the same way again.
Eyebrows.
Right.
Right? Alopecia means that the
Thick
whole...
eyebrows.
Thick eyebrows. He
Right.
had caterpillars on his face.
Right, right. He had Steve Harvey's mustache on his eyes.
Exactly. Two of them.
Right.
Two Steve Harvey mustaches.
As weeks passed, the Oscars incident stopped being just an event and started becoming a symbol. A symbol of pressure, image collapse, and the unpredictable nature of live fame in the modern era. But symbols always attract deeper interpretation. And in this case, the interpretation split the world into different narratives. Some saw Will Smith as a man overwhelmed by emotion in a high-pressure environment. Others saw a breakdown of long-term personal tensions finally spilling into public view. And then there were those who believed the moment represented something even larger: the end of Hollywood's illusion of control. Because Hollywood has always relied on one thing above all else: the ability to shape how stories are told. But in the digital age, that control is fragile. Clips go viral instantly. Opinions spread faster than statements. And external voices, whether celebrities like 50 Cent or millions of online commentators, can reshape a narrative within hours. That is what made this moment different. It wasn't just about what happened on stage. It was about how quickly the world took ownership of the story. And once that happens, no amount of PR can fully restore the original version of events. The story becomes something else entirely. Something collective. Something uncontrollable. And something that continues to evolve long after the cameras stop rolling. As the dust settled, Hollywood found itself in an unfamiliar position. Not control, but reaction. For decades, the industry had mastered the art of shaping narratives before they escaped into the public. But this time, the story had already gone global before anyone inside the system could stabilize it. And that is where the deeper conversation began. Will Smith was no longer just being discussed as an actor. He was being analyzed as a symbol of pressure, identity, and long-term emotional tension playing out under global surveillance. Every past success in the narrative also became more complicated in public discussion. Interviews that once seemed empowering were now being revisited with critical attention. People began questioning the balance between public honesty and private complexity. And in the middle of this storm, outside voices like 50 Cent continued to be mentioned across social platforms. Not because they were directly involved in the event, but because they represented something Hollywood often struggles with: unfiltered interpretation. Unlike traditional Hollywood responses, which are carefully structured and legally reviewed, these external reactions felt raw, direct, uncontrolled. That contrast amplified the entire situation. Because when controlled narratives collide with uncontrolled commentary, the audience naturally gravitates toward what feels more authentic, even if it is incomplete. And that shift in perception is what truly changed everything. The Oscars incident was no longer just about what happened in a few seconds. It became about who controls meaning afterward. And in this case, control was no longer in Hollywood's hands. As global attention intensified, the incident began evolving into something much larger than entertainment news. It became a case study in modern fame: how quickly an image can collapse, and how permanently a single moment can redefine a legacy. Will Smith's career, built over decades of consistency, suddenly found itself under a microscope. Projects, interviews, and future appearances were all evaluated differently in the aftermath. But what made this situation unique was not just the incident itself. It was the speed of reinterpretation. In the digital era, there is no waiting period for context. Every frame becomes evidence. Every silence becomes meaning. And every public figure becomes a subject of continuous analysis. That is why discussions about Will and Jada expanded far beyond the Oscars. Their entire public history was being reconstructed in real time by audiences worldwide. At the same time, commentary from figures like 50 Cent continued circulating in online discussions. His name became part of the broader conversation, not as a participant in the event, but as a contrasting voice in how celebrity culture is interpreted. Because in moments like this, the audience doesn't just consume the original story, they consume every reaction to it. And those reactions often shape the final narrative more than the event itself. Hollywood insiders understood this shift clearly. The old system of message control was no longer enough. Once a story enters the global digital space, it fragments into thousands of interpretations. and none of them can be fully reversed. The Oscars moment had officially transitioned from incident to legacy, and legacies, once formed, rarely return to their original shape. With time, the conversation began to evolve again. What was once shock turned into analysis, and analysis slowly turned into cultural reflection. The Oscars incident was no longer just entertainment news. It had become a reference point for discussions about celebrity pressure, public identity, and emotional boundaries in high-stakes environments. Will Smith's image, once carefully maintained as universally likable, now carried layers of contradiction. Some still defended him, emphasizing humanity and emotional response. Others viewed the moment as evidence of deeper instability beneath the surface of curated perfection. Jada Pinkett Smith's public persona also remained under constant re-evaluation. Every past interview was re-examined for meaning beyond its original context. Every statement about relationships and independence was interpreted through the lens of the broader narrative now surrounding them. And throughout all of this, the presence of external commentary, including mentions of 50 Cent, continued to symbolize something larger than any single opinion. It represented the breakdown of a one-directional media system. In earlier decades, Hollywood could contain its stories. It could define the beginning, middle, and end of a narrative. But now the audience participates in shaping all three. That participation is what turned this incident into a lasting cultural moment. Because once a story becomes collective ownership, it stops belonging to the people involved. It becomes public property. And public property cannot be controlled, only interpreted. That is the new reality Hollywood is still struggling to adapt to. Today, the Oscars incident stands as one of the most word. Hollywood has always been built on storytelling. But this moment showed what happens when the story escapes its creators. Will Smith remains one of the most recognizable figures in global cinema, but his narrative is no longer singular. It is layered, debated, and continuously reinterpreted. Jada Pinkett Smith remains equally central to the conversation, not as a background figure, but as part of a broader public discussion about relationships, identity, and personal truth in the spotlight. And surrounding them is an ecosystem of voices, reactions, and interpretations, including cultural commentators like 50 Cent, whose presence in the discourse highlights how modern celebrity narratives are no longer confined to Hollywood itself. They are shaped everywhere. In interviews, in clips, in comments, in reactions, in debates that never fully end. Because in today's world, every moment becomes permanent content. And every public action becomes history in real time. So the question is no longer just what happened at the Oscars. The question is what it means now, and whether Hollywood will ever regain full control of its own stories again. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Do you think this was just emotion, or the moment Hollywood's control finally broke forever?